Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today you'll guide an ancient civilization from its founding. Your decisions will determine whether it will thrive and be remembered as the greatest civilization in history, or falter and be lost to the sands of time. Which leader will you guide? Which technologies and advantages will your civilization research? Where will you find your starting city? Will you focus on expansion or productivity? Will you build soaring wonders or trade networks? Will you find new cities and towns or recruit powerful armies to create an empire? Will your people praise you during a golden age or curse you for your oppressive taxes? Now, each decision that you make is another shining stone in your civilization's unique mosaic. Mosaic, a story of civilization, is for 1 to 6 players. It's for ages 14 and up. It takes about 2 hours to play, and it's published by Forbidden Games. The retail edition of Mosaic will be in stores starting September 23rd, 2022, and your last chance to purchase the Colossus edition on Kickstarter starts October 13th, 2022, and you can click the link below to be notified. Today, we'll be doing a rule school where I'll teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now, in case you have questions about certain aspects of the rule, I've placed timestamps just below me so you can jump to any section you like. Well, let's get started. In Mosaic, a story of civilization, you'll be starting with a wide open, randomized map. But on that map, you'll be creating cities and ports and towns and wonders and recruiting and moving military around, all to try to get influence over certain areas. Not only will you be one of many possible leaders that give you asymmetric abilities and starting goods, but you'll also be gaining technologies that will give you pillars of civilization that you can put together for prerequisites to get other technologies, giving you this engine building feel. You'll be managing your own board of population, goods, production, and trade goods. In addition to wonders, you'll also be getting governments that will help you out in mid-game scoring, as well as getting golden age tiles, giving you benefits but also points at the end of the game, and you might be achieving special things like militaristic civilizations get you points at the end. So even though you're building up in different regions, you're never sure exactly when the scorings are going to happen throughout the game, but you'll also be scoring for what you've done at the end of the game as well. To set up, you're first going to take the board and put it in the middle of the table. Next, you're going to find the coins and place them off into like piles off to the side. Now, I'm just showing you one of each coin, but you'll be putting all the coins of each type off into a pile. I'm also showing you different types of components because this game came in 2 different versions. The standard retail pledge, this is the one that you can get in retail stores. It was also the Sphinx pledge for Kickstarter. Those used cardboard tokens. And there was the Colossus version, which was the deluxe Kickstarter version, and those came with metal coins, just showing you the difference. So depending on which version you have, we're all talking the same language here. You'll do the same for all the resource tokens. Again, for the standard edition, it were these cardboard tokens, and for the Colossus edition, it was these big wooden chunky bits. Now again, I'm just showing you one of each. You'll put all the piles of all the each off to the side. We have ideas, and this is 1 idea, 5 ideas. We have stone, 1 stone, 5 stone. We have food, 1 food, and we have 5 food. Each player is then going to select a player board, which will have a color and a city name on it. Then each player is going to gain 5 population. In the retail edition, they are tokens that look like this, and they come in 2 denominations, 1s and 5s. You're going to make sure you give yourself 5 population, but in the Colossus edition, you'll use 5 miniatures, 1 for each population, and this is the detail of what those miniatures look like. On your player board, you'll also place a cube at the 0 point of the different production tracks. Next, you're going to locate the 10 port hexes. You can tell because they are in ports, basically half water and half land, and they have this ship icon on it. On those, you will place these +3 fish tokens on all 10 of them if you're playing with more than 3 players. If you're playing a 2-player game, you will not place them in either of these 2 regions, as neither of these regions are used at all in a 2-player game. If you're playing a 3-player game, you won't place it in this single region of Hispania because it's not used in a 3-player game at all. Next, you're going to find all the cash tiles that look like this. They're double-sided. This is face down. You're going to place them all face down off to the side of the board, and you're then going to shuffle them up and place them randomly, one of these on each of the hexes on the entire board that has that matching spot. So as you place them on the board, it'll look like this. Keep in mind, if you were playing a 2-player game, you would not put any in this region. And if you're playing a 3-player game, you would not put any of those in either of these 2 regions as mentioned previously. Next, you'll find these trade good tokens. You're going to put them off to the side of the board, all face down like this, and shuffle them all up. Then you'll randomly place them in each of the open hexes, meaning they don't already have a token on them, on the board. However, you want to make sure that they're actually on like this land like this. They don't just go out here in the middle of nowhere. Plus, they need to go on a hex that has all 6 sides. For example, this kind of has a hex, but it doesn't have all 6 sides, so you would not put one there. But here, you'll actually see all 6 sides, so you would place one here. Now notice I put them in these spots because there's actually all 6 sides. Even though these sides are a little bit shorter, there's still 6 sides, where these ones only have 4 sides. 1, 2, 3. The other 2 coming down aren't here. Neither is this one or this one, so I don't place them there. Now, keep in mind, you're going to do this for all the regions. Unless you're playing a 2 or 3-player game, you'll leave out the regions I spoke about earlier. But once they're all face down like this, you'll then flip them all face up. You'll find many that have this little cross in the middle of it. Those you remove from the board and put them back in the box. You won't need them in the game. So it'll look something like this, and this helps randomize each game. Next, you're going to create the technology deck. You're going to find all the technology cards. First, you're going to separate out the Empire scoring card that has the technology back on it. You're also going to separate out all the cards that have the S in the upper left. These are the back sides of these. These are the starter technology cards. You're going to take these starter technology cards, you're going to shuffle them, and you're going to deal 5 to each player. Then, with the ones that weren't dealt out, you will shuffle these in with the main technology deck, making sure you keep the Empire scoring card out. Next, depending on the amount of players, you're going to shuffle this Empire scoring into one of these stacks. Now, if you're playing a 4 to 6 player game, let's just say that this is going to be the bottom stack, this will be the middle stack, and this will be the top stack. If you're playing with 4 to 6 players, you're going to shuffle this Empire scoring into the bottom stack, so it will be somewhere in this stack. Then, you would place the middle stack on top of this, and the top stack on this. So you could go just like this. This means in a 4 to 6 player game, that era score is going to come sometime randomly in the bottom third of that deck. However, if you're playing a 2 or 3 player game, that Empire scoring is going to get shuffled into the middle deck. And that means it's going to be in the middle third. So again, you would shuffle into this deck would go here, and this deck would go here. So in that 2 to 3 player game, that's somewhere in the middle. You're then going to take that constructed deck, place it on the technology deck spot, and then you'll reveal the top 5 cards and place them in these technology spaces. So it might look something like this. Next, you're going to construct the build deck. First, you're going to take out the Empire scoring card from the build deck. You're then going to shuffle the rest of the cards and split them to 2 even halves there. You're then going to take that Empire scoring and you're going to shuffle it in to this bottom half. And once that's all shuffled in and that's in the bottom half, you'll place the other half on top. So that Empire scoring is going to come up somewhere in the bottom half of this deck, regardless of the number of players. And you'll notice the spot for the build cards on the top of the board. And then you'll put the deck in its corresponding spot face down and then reveal the first 5 cards in their corresponding spots. Next, you're going to create the population deck. You're going to take out the Empire scoring for the population card. You're going to shuffle the rest of these cards. Then you're going to count out a certain amount of these cards depending on the amount of players. As you see here below, like in a 4-player game, you'll only take 12 of these cards randomly. So in this case, I took 12 cards for a 4-player game. I've split them in half, so there's 6 cards in each of these. I will then shuffle this Empire scoring into the bottom half, regardless of the amount of players. It's always going in the bottom half here. This goes on top, so we know that the Empire scoring is somewhere in the bottom half of these cards. In this case, somewhere in the bottom 6 other population cards. In the upper right-hand part of the board, you'll see a place for the population deck and 2 face-up cards. And so you place them like that accordingly. Next, you're going to create the tax and tariff deck, and this is set up exactly the same as you just did the population deck, even using the exact count as you see below in a 4-player game. You would count out only 12 of the cards. You would always split them in 2 halves, regardless of the player count, and then you shuffle in the Empire scoring card into that bottom half, and then you place the top half on top of it. So the Empire scoring is somewhere in the bottom half. And at the bottom left-hand side of the board, you'll see a spot for that deck and 2 spots for face-up cards. And so you'll place that deck there and randomly put first 2 cards out face up. Now, if you have the Colossus edition, they have a scoreboard that comes with it, and you can either use the population markers that will go in here and they stack, or you can, for fun, use some of the population minis and place them on here as well. Now, the retail version does not come with a scoreboard. It will come with a score sheet that you'll be using during the game and at the end of the game. Now at the top of that scoreboard, you'll find the wonder tiles and place them on here. If you don't have that, you can just place them near the board. If you have enough room on your table, you can place these all face up in a display near the board, but it's not absolutely necessary because right now you're gonna give everybody a reference card. It actually unfolds. It actually shows you all the wonders that are available, what they do, and certain building requirements and such. And all the detail that you'd find on those tiles are right here in each player's reference card. You'll also do the same for the Golden Age tiles. Now with the Civilization Achievement tiles, you are going to shuffle these and you're going to randomly only select 9 of these. The rest of them will be removed and placed in the box. Now those 9 selected can be placed on the scoreboard if you have the scoreboard. Either way, I actually recommend taking the 9 that were selected, placing them face up near the board so you can see which 9 are actually in play that you're shooting for throughout the game. You'll also place all of the government tiles in the government spot on the bottom of the board, and you'll want to make sure that all the tiles have that icon in the upper right. Next, select a starting player any way you see fit and give them the starting player token in front of them. Now the next 3 chapters in the timestamps below are going to be selecting a leader, drafting starting technologies, and placing a starting city. Now you probably won't know what to do here at this point because you don't really know how to play the game and what you're trying to do, so feel free, if this is your first time playing, to in the timestamps below in the chapters, skip to the next section after these, which will be the object of the game section, but don't forget to come back to this starting leader section just before you start. So starting with the last player in turn order, which is going to be the player sitting just to the right of the player with the first player marker. They're going to take the available leader cards and they're going to select one and pass the rest of them counterclockwise to their right, meaning that the last player to select will be the first player in turn order. Any of these that are not selected will be placed back in the box. You don't need them for the rest of the game. And each of these are going to give you some starting things and some abilities, and these will make more sense later. Now, even after you select your leader, you won't be getting the starting things just quite yet, so hold tight. Now, if you remember in setup, every player was given 5 starting technology cards, and at this point, we're going to draft starting technologies. So you're going to take these cards, you're going to select one of them, and you're going to place it in front of you. You'll get to look at these cards, you'll decide which one you're keeping, and you'll place it in front of you. You'll then take the cards that you did not keep and you will pass it to the player to your left, which means you're going to be getting cards from your right, from that player, and you're going to, from these 4, you're going to look at them, you're going to select another one, and you'll keep going through this process until you have drafted 5 technology cards. Now you won't do anything with these things quite yet. Now each player is going to be able to place a starting city. Now if you're playing with the standard tokens, it will say city on one side, it will not have text on the other. So once you know what you're doing and you know what they look like, you can have them more beautiful, or if you want to see the text on there, you put it like this. If you have the Colossus version, you'll be using miniatures, and here's a closer look at what the city looks like so you can easily find it. Now starting with the start player and going clockwise, each player will place their city on a hex on the board. Now keep in mind, you cannot place cities where the fish are, where the ports are. Only ports can go there. So your city, you could place them, and you could place them on maybe some of one of the cash tokens. Now if you place your city on one of these cash tiles, you'll get exactly what it says in resources, in this case 10 money, and then you would remove this cash token from the game. Now anytime you gain money or resources directly, you could put them on the storage spot on your board. Now, if instead you place it on one of the trade goods, these are the face-up ones that are there, you'll put your city there. Now, you'll take that trade good, and you'll place it in an open spot here in your trade goods. Now, important that if you ever get a second trade good of the same type, you don't put it in a new spot, you put it on top of the one you already have, because each of these spots is for a unique one. So if I got a different one next time, we would go like this. This is going to help you keep track of how many unique trade goods you have throughout the game, which will be an important part of it. Now, after you've placed your starting city, you can get the starting resources and production from your leader. For example, it says start 10 stone and 10 money. I'll take those resources, put them on my storage on my board, as well as the money. For production, we started with 0. I have +5 stone, so I went up there, and I had +3 ideas, so I went there. That will help you track your production. We'll show you what this means a little bit later. Don't worry too much about the ability. These are all sort of self-explanatory, but they'll make more sense to you as you begin to play the game. Also, now that you've placed your starting city, you can play starting technology cards that you drafted. Now, you're never forced to play a card that you could play, but you might be able to play it. If you have a starting card, if it has no requisites up here, you can just play it. Like you can play this card and you'll get 2 stone production and gain a population. Now, you'll also see these icons here in the lower right. Those are known as part of the 9 pillars of civilization. Like this is building and this is urbanization. These icons are going to allow you to do some engine building and do different things throughout the game a little bit easier. Because, for example, if I had this card, I would not be able to play it because I do not yet have one of those pillars on the bottom of one of my cards. So this one I would not be able to play at the beginning. Whereas something like this, I could play if I wanted to. It would allow me to take any trade goods or cash tile from a hex on the board and gain 5 money, but it also gives us those. Now that I've played that, that is the requirement for this. So now I could play this card. So you can see there's an order of the way that you do things, and this now gives me some more icons of the 9 pillars of civilization. But this one, maybe I won't even be able to play it all at the beginning. So it just depends. And again, if it doesn't have a requisite, you can play it, but you're never forced to play technology cards. And speaking of that, you're not going to want to be holding these cards in your hand the whole time. So cards that you have that you don't want to or can't play yet are best kept in front of you face down. You can look at them at any time, but then on your turn, you can play a technology card. It does not cost an action, and you'll be able to flip it over assuming that you can actually play it. The object of the game is to have the most points. Now, during the game, there'll be some empire scoring. If you remember, we shuffled these cards into certain spots of the different decks, and that will trigger different scoring during the game, but then you'll be scoring for the end game for all different things, and I'll be going over details throughout the video. Now, the flow of the game starts with the starting player, and then going clockwise. Each player on their turn will take 1 action that will go to the next player. Now, the things that you can do are summarized on your reference card, but they're also printed on the board at different spots as well. Like the first possible action you can do is work. And it shows here it's population plus production. Let's show you how this works. So when working, you're going to be gaining one of the 3 non-monetary resources like stone, food, or ideas. And how you do this is you look at your total population and you add your production. So if you wanted stone, you're only going to get 1 of these. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 population up here at the top plus 5. So I would get 10 stone, or I could get 5 food because I have 0 plus 5, or I could get 8 ideas, the 3 production plus the 5. So you're going to decide which one of those you're going to get. And again, anytime you gain resources, you're going to get them and put them on your storage. Now remember, you're just taking 1 action. It's the next player's turn. So another option is population. You can take one of these 2 cards and you would pay the amount of food and gain that much population. So let's say we had 5, 6, 7 food, okay? And we need to pay 12, and you're like, well, you can't pay that. You can actually. Anytime you're spending one of the 3 non-monetary types of goods, stone, food, or ideas, you can spend money in place of those, but you have to spend 2 money for every resource. So here I have 5, 6, 7. So for right here, why do we need to pay 12 food, but I only have 7? That would be 5 more. Now with this, I have $10. So if I wanted to, I could spend this $10 and these 7 food, and I would be able to do this action. And that would allow me to get 2 more population, which again is going to give me 2 more here, which anytime I work and get more things, it's going to be this plus wherever I'm at. You would discard that card, and then the next one would come up like this. Now, if this deck is completely ever empty and there's no cards left, you can always pay 15 food to get 2 population. Another action you can take is building. Now when you build, most of the time, you're going to take one of these cards and build one of these types of things to build. So for example, let's say we want to build a city, we'll build this garrison city. Keep in mind, not only are all the costs and things right on the front of your player aid, like building a city is 4 stone and 2 population, but it's also listed right on the board as well. And just as a reminder, when you spend resources, they're coming off your storage back into the supply. And if you're spending population, they're just coming off and going off your board. That's how you're tracking how much population that you have. After you've paid those goods, you'll put the card in front of you and do what it says. Like this says, gain a military unit. Now military units, normally are going to be cavalry or infantry. Now if you're playing with the tokens, they look like that. And if you're playing with the Colossus edition, on the left is the cavalry, on the right is the infantry. Also, the card reminds you to add 5 money to the tax and tariff bonus area. This comes from the game's supply, not your personal stash. And even on the board, it kind of reminds you that, hey, add 5 when a city is built or 10 for report, and you'll add this here. We'll show you who gets these later when someone takes that tax and tariff action. And when you build that city, you can go in any region, and if you do build on, again, one of the cash or trade tokens, you'll do the same things that I showed you when we were placing our starting cities. Remember, cities cannot go here, only ports can go where those fish and port icons are. Now these are going to be important. Let's say I went here because I wanted this trade good. This is important because during empire scoring, you're going to be trying to have the most influence in different regions, and cities actually give you 2 of that influence. We'll talk more about that later. And we were able to add military. Now military is going to be worth 1 influence, but there's certain technologies that will allow them to be worth a little bit more. But you don't actually ever put these on hexes. You just put them sort of near the region that it's in. That will help you count for influence when it's time to score. Now don't forget that you've built this now, so this is in your sort of tableau, and now you have 2 more of those pillars of civilization. Now you might be wondering about the siege, and the siege is a type of military you can put out there when you can. However, you need the siege engine technology in order to do that, and that negates the opponent's city influence when calculating majorities. And the last thing you'll do after you build is you will refresh where you built with the card, and that's the end of your turn. Now if you're building a port city, don't forget, you always have to pay the cost for a city or port city, 4 stone and 2 population. Now these act like normal cities, except they're the only ones that can be built on these port spaces I've been telling you about. So you could build one here, for example. We would put this here. And again, depending on which version you're playing, it will say port or it will have little ships in it like that. So you could build one right there, but you will take that. Now that is considered a trade good. So it will go into your trade goods section, but you will get +3 food production from wherever you're at as well. And don't forget, you'll also gain 10 coins, but you'll add 10 from the game supply to that tariff and bonus area I showed you earlier. Now remember, you're only taking 1 action, and in each build action, you can only build 1 thing, but I'm showing you 2 other things you can build are different towns. Now you can build a farm town or a manufactory town. Then again, you can use the tokens, or you can use the miniatures that match. The farm has a little sort of all the different rows of trees and such here. And then here you have, you could clearly see what they look like there with the miniatures. Now, both of these, they're free. You don't have to pay for towns, and you do what the card says. So if you built a farm town, so here you'd gain 5 food and a food production. Here you gain 5 coins and a tariff production. We'll talk more about that later, but that is one of the tracks on your player board. Now, when you place one of these towns, it needs to go next to one of your cities, meaning it's a hex that's touching it. Now, if you put it on a hex with a cash tile, again, you'll get those goods and remove that cash tile from the board. Or if it's a trade good, remember, you would get the trade good and put it on your trade good board as talked about earlier. So why else are you building these other than getting the things? Well, each town is going to be worth 1 influence when you're looking at the scoring for the certain regions. Again, we'll go over more of that detail in just a moment. And the manufactory town at the end of the game, for each of the 3 different trade goods shown here, if you have all 3 of these, you'll get 5 points. So for example, right now, I have this trade good right here. If by the end of the game I can get these 2, I'll get 5 points. Now the last possible thing you could build, remember you're only doing 1 on your turn, are projects. Now projects always cost 5 stone and 5 ideas, but they typically give you some scoring for the end of the game. Like this is 1 point for the building style pillar of civilization that you have at the end of the game. If you remember, our clay bricks from the beginning of the game, one of the starting technologies had one of these. So if this was the end of the game, we would have 2 points already, but now you're gonna be sort of building that idea of trying to build this type of pillar of civilization in your civilization to try to score more at the end of the game. I mentioned that normally when you build, you'll be selecting one of these cards and building those, but you might want to build something that's not here in a timely point in the game. Like you might want to build a port and there's no port here. You can still spend the money, build the port, but you just don't get the benefit that's on the card. Now a different action you can take is constructing a wonder. Now it costs 20 stone and 5 food for your first one, but then each one after that increases 5 each. So your second one would be 25 stone and 10 food and so on and so forth. So let's look at the hanging gardens here and let's look at inside of this reference card. Now again, it shows you all the wonders, shows you all the different things. For example, the hanging gardens, it tells you what it is. 3 points for adjacent city, and it gives you -3 unrest. And positive unrest is minus points at the end of the game, so this actually helps you. Now all of these things on the tile are listed here because again, sometimes you'll just be stacking these tiles off to the side of the board if you don't have room to display them all. Also, if you're playing with the standard game, it's going to have a token like this. Otherwise, if you're playing the Colossus version, you'll have miniatures to put out. Now, anytime you place any wonder, it has to go into a region where you have at least 1 city. I have one here, so I could place it anywhere, but I'm going to be getting 3 points for each adjacent city. So like that, that's going to get me, at this point, 6 points at the end of the game. And those points don't matter whose cities they are. It's just an adjacent city. Now, a different option on your turn is to Gain a technology. Again, you're going to spend 5 ideas and get one of these that are in the display. Now remember, when you get these, you're never forced to play them. You can play them, they don't cost an action. You must have the requirements in order to do that, but you don't have to play it if you don't want to. And again, the ones that you are not playing, you place face down in front of you as described earlier. And as a reminder, to play one of these later, it doesn't cost anything on your turn, but you must have the requirements. So I would need to have at least 2 of these. And remember that this icon does not count towards this unless after it's played. So if I've had 2 other of these pillars in my tableau, I would have been able to play this, and now I gain this. And then you would refill this from the top of the deck. One of the options you can take is to take the tax and tariff option. To do that, you select one of these 2 cards and do what the card says. Let's first look at tariff. So this gives you 3 times your unique trade goods. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times 3, that's 12, plus 2 times our cities. Let's say we have 2 cities out there. That is gonna be 4 more, so now we're at 16, plus our tariff production is at 3, so we're gonna get $19. But we'll keep this in front of us. This will be 2 unrest, minus 2 points at the end of the game. Now don't forget, anytime you take one of these as an action, you'll also take the money in this holding area. Remember, that money came anytime people are building ports and or cities. You'll gain this as well. And when you're done with your action, you will just refill right there. Now, if you had taken the tax card instead, it's 2 times your population. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd get 14 plus 2 times the government pillar icons I have. Maybe I built a capital city earlier. I'd get 2 times for each of those, plus your tax production, you get that in money. But again, this will be worth minus 3 points at the end of the game. Now, if you take the tax and tariff action, there's no cards left either in the pile or in the display there. All future tax actions will generate 2 money per population, plus your government symbol, plus your tax production, and all future tariff actions will generate you 2 money per your trade goods, plus cities, plus tariff production. Now, when you take a military action, you can either recruit a military unit for 5 money and or move military units for 1 money per unit. And you can do either or both of these for 1 action. Now, we already talked about recruiting military units earlier and which ones are available to you, but to do that action here, the most you can recruit in 1 turn is 2 new military units. However, there are other leaders and technologies that might allow you to break that rule. But additionally, you might want to move a unit, and it's 1 money per unit, and you have to move it to an adjacent region. So maybe I think I've got this one all covered in the area scoring, and I want to move it to this region over here because it's adjacent, and I also have a port there. Now, when doing this, you can move 1, some, or all your military units this way, paying 1 money for each one moved. A different action you can take on your turn is government. Now here in your player aid, you can see the ones that are available and what's required, what the cost is, and what the benefits. Now you know which one you want, and you have the required prerequisites, and you can spend the cost. You would just find that tile from this list of government tiles. Now you can only own 1 government tile at a time, but this says during the empire scoring, you'll basically score an additional 1 point per city that you own in a single region. So that would be good based upon what we were doing with a bunch of those cities in that bottom right region. Now you'll notice this, while you have this government tile, you can flip this over and notice now it's not there to remind you that you can't do this again. Now that lets you take all of the displayed cards of either the technology, population, build, or tax and tariff. Now you take all those and you put them at the bottom of that deck and put new ones out. Now since you can only have 1 government tile at a time, if you got another one, you would need to replace it with the one that you got. Remember, this is always icon side up when you get the government. And you would simply take the one that you were replacing and put it back there and make sure that it is that icon side up for the next person that gets it. Now during the game, you may have gotten what was required for a certain achievement. For example, populous civilization, you might have 12 population. At any time on your turn, it does not cost an action. If you have fulfilled one of these and it's still in the pile, meaning no one else has taken it yet, you'd put the tile in front of you that shows you how many points you'll get at the end of the game for this. Remember that only 9 achievements are used each game randomly. Similarly, you can obtain a golden age tile, like for example the golden age of medicine, and if you had 6 of these, you would gain that tile, again having that requirement in your pillars of civilization. You'd immediately get the benefit, gain 2 population, but you'd get that at the end of the game. So players will continue taking turns in clockwise order, taking 1 single action until it's interrupted by empire scoring. Remember, there's one of these cards in the different decks, and they're in different spots depending on which deck it is. But as soon as one of these cards have been taken or shown as it's refilling a display, Now remember, you're going to be scoring each region after the player finishes their action that revealed the empire scoring. So for each region, we're going to look at it. Now each city, whether it's port or regular city or wonder, is going to be worth 2 influence. Every town is worth 1. Every military unit is worth 1. Remember, some of these may change depending on certain abilities and cards and things like that. But if this was it, the red player is going to have 2, 4, 6, 7, where this player is going to have 2, 4. So red has the most influence in this region. Now remember, this empire scoring for influence is all on the back of your player aid, plus the hottest score is. So the person that has the most, which is red, is going to get 3 points. Plus they're going to get a point for every city or wonder, whoever has it. It doesn't matter. So that player is going to get 3 points, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow, they're going to get 8 points for that. And second place is just going to get 2 points. Now, if there's a tie for the most influence, all tied players receive the full amount of victory points. But if there's a tie for second place, those tied players get nothing. Now, keep in mind also that government tiles that we also went over will score through empire as well. Just follow the scoring on that specific tile that you have. And then turns will continue in clockwise motion until one of 2 things happens. Either the third empire scoring card's revealed, which you'll then go through a third empire scoring as normal, or if 2 of the 3 stacks of tiles between the Wonders, Golden Age, and Civilization achievements are also gone. Now if it ends this way, you'll still do an empire scoring. Then you'll complete this round, meaning the player with the last in turn order, you'll finish it with them, and then you'll get 1 more full round. Now very important, if it ended with this, but then later, during the last round in plus that we just talked about, an empire scoring card does come up, it does not happen. There's only a maximum of 3 empire scorings in any game. Then you'll do endgame scoring, which is right on the back of your sheet. Each city's 2 points, each town's a point. The Golden Ages and Civilization achievements, 6 points, as we showed you earlier. Wonders is shown as each tile. The manufacturing towns, 5 points per completed that we showed you earlier. Projects is shown as the card. Technology cards that might show them. And then minus the unrest. Then whoever has the most points is the winner. If it's tied, the tied players with the most wonders is the winner. If it's still a tied, the one with the most money is the winner. And if it's still tied, rejoice in your shared victory. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Mosaic, a story of civilization, faster than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, I've placed a link below me right in the description of this video. Now, that's the best place to ask them since I'll be notified, but so will Forbidden Games.